I'm a young fellow. I have had streaks of adrenaline come to me in several forms, such as ear piercings, yes, drunken regurgitating incidents in front of police officers, go up, and of course thoughts about fornication at a very high rate. But this served its purpose when I was even more younger. And now that I have matured, I have found my adrenaline fixes in a far more healthier source, and that is trekking. I began trekking back in 2009, and from doing small treks in Maharashtra, I went on to conquering challenging and more tougher peaks in the Himalayas. And what I love so much about trekking, which I believe that some of you must have experienced, are those fleeting moments or series of moments that just pass your gaze for a second, just a second, and that stays etched in your memory for the rest of your life. It's September 2012. Me and 22 others with the group India Hikes are en route to Roopkund Lake, which stands at 15,000 feet. It's famous for the hundreds of human skeletons found outside the lake, which is believed to be the skeletons of pilgrims and porters who died in a hailstorm. And that is why this place is also called Skeleton Lake. Now we are on day 3 of the trek. On the one side is a rocky mountainous path that leads upwards and downwards. On the other side, overlooking our tents pitched, is a vast open meadow. This meadow extends to as far as you can see, and it's called Bedni Bugyal. And it's Asia's largest meadow, and it's spectacular. Now waking up in the morning amidst a gloomy sky and a light shower, most of us, including myself, were very lethargic to change our clothes. But we have our bags packed as it is. We come out of our tents and we get ready to ascend to the next base camp, which is called Bhagwa Basa at 13,000 feet. Now it's starting to drizzle menacingly, which actually shouldn't have happened at that time of the year, but one can never predict the mountains. Now we put on our jackets, which we were luckily told should be cold-proof as well as waterproof. And now in a line, with an overcast backdrop lighting our path, we begin our ascent. We have about 25% more to go before reaching the base camp, and all of us are feeling invigorated and hopeful. But after an hour, we're suddenly hit by a furious downpour married to a tremendous wind. We are out there on the side of the mountain, no rooftop, and the rain is beating down on us mercilessly. We stand at one spot, turning our backs against the direction of the wind. Visibility is quickly diminishing over a thick layer of clouds. It's only been a few seconds, but the situation has completely changed. Now that is something that I would like to call adrenaline. With the water pounding me, my normally sure-footed foundation suddenly giving way, and a ball of anxiety in my stomach growing from a tiny dot to a seed, to an acorn, onwards and upwards. This perhaps seems like the most unlikeliest of situations, the unlikeliest of places, the strangest of times. But the minute I turn my head around, I see a beautiful girl. This girl was a trekker from another trekking group. She had disbanded from them for some reason, and as luck would have it, the wind had slowed my progress so that I was a little further away from mine as well. This woman, from the hooded jacket that she was wearing, from the way her hair stuck on her forehead because of the rains, and her face in general, she was cute. Although my mind should have been on another female, Mother Nature, it seems like I had thrown my better judgment to the wind, literally. She looked cold. She was shivering, worse than I was. As any gentleman would, I put on my best, rugged, experienced and reassuring trekker face, and I asked, "Are you okay?" She was freezing. Now, thinking like a typical man, the next logical thing is that I'm supposed to find a solution to this problem. The only issue was that I had no ideas. We were both fighting the cold out, clenching ourselves, which is when I noticed her hands. They were bare. From her hands, I slowly brought my gaze to my own hands, and I noticed that I had one glove on. I had purchased a pair of woolen gloves back in Bombay, but obviously because of the rains, they got drenched. Now my good friend Abhinash, being the helping, generous and kind soul that he is, he offered one of the 2 waterproof gloves he bought for himself. What a guy. Now with my rugged face still in full effect, I pull off my glove and I hand it to her. She slips it on immediately, and by that time, one more member from each of the 2 groups we belong to reached us. We started moving ahead, a ragtag mob of us leaning into the wind and stammering along like the night's watch on top of the wall. At this point, I don't know if it was my hands being fully bare now or what, but I was really freezing. Although my mind and, of course, my hormones were demanding otherwise, I was physically too cold and drenched to turn around and talk to the girl. Everyone was battling the weather which was slowly and ominously intensifying. Somehow, thank God, after what seemed like ages, we reached a shelter and threw our bodies inside. The shelter was like a bunker, one bunker for each of the 2 trekking groups. As I was frozen stiff, I just rushed myself inside into my group's bunker, and my glove, or rather my friend's glove, forgotten with the girl who was huddled tightly in another room with her own companions. I can't move. I'm paralyzed. It's like an Arctic refuge camp inside. And people, including people who don't really smoke, they are pulling out cigarettes and greedily sucking on them to keep warm. And I can vividly remember this image of a kindergarten school teacher. He had the way he was holding the cigarette, lighting it, smoking on it. It's almost like that was his jam. He knew how to do it, although he never did it before. At this point, Avinash comes over, shivering and breathing heavily like the rest of us. Looking at the sorry state of me, his eyes move over my legs, my arms, and then my hands. He pauses. He notices something. He asks me about the glove. I pause. Then I tell him what happened. Of course, desperately emphasizing just how beautiful this girl was. The kind of beauty that drives a man to do immoral and terrible things with another man's property. He was not amused, but worse, he wanted his glove back. I sheepishly milked for time, warming and crisping my limbs for as long as I could possibly to avoid what I had to do next. I pulled myself up and shuffled to the other bunker and knocked on the door. It opens, and a newly thawed climber about my age just warily stares back at me. I am looking for the girl who has my glove, I say. There were so many eyes looking back at me. Some glazed, some closed, some confused. Mostly confused actually. And a second later, a voice shouts, "Here!" Something gets passed in my direction. I stumble back, the door closes, and I'm back in my bunker. I take a short walk of shame and hand the glove to Avinash and scurry for a place to sleep. The next day, we mobilize to get back on our trek, and I noticed that somehow the other group had already prepped and started going. No, you mean she was back out there again, barehanded, in need of my thoughtful and timely solution? I go back to my group, I canvass everyone to see if anyone knew anything about my frozen beauty. Did anyone else talk to her? Does anyone know anything about her? One guy did talk to her. Well, tell me. The only info he had was the name of the trekking group. A woman of such astounding beauty, and all he had was the name of the group. My frozen bare-handed beauty was now a nameless frozen bare-handed beauty. The following week, I was back home and predictably occupied with furiously searching online to see if any trekking photos had been put up by any companies running treks anywhere in Rupkund. Nothing. Facebook, nothing. Google, nothing. Google Plus, nothing. There was a will. Believe me, there was a will. But there was no way. She was lost. I struggled to find meaning in what happened. Was I supposed to have professed my preemptive love for her right there on the mountain? Yelling it in her ear over the deafening wind like Jon Snow to Ygritte? Or was I supposed to awkwardly force a business card into her backpack, which would have just turned into shreds by the time she found it? But in the end, I had to resolve that our paths were meant to cross only for that one brief moment. And even with all the social media tricks and tools at my disposal, considering it's something that I actually do for a living, I would never be able to track her down. My frozen, bare-handed, nameless beauty also had no digital fingerprint. No pun intended there. That's my story. Thank you so much.